Welcome to this crash course on climate, biodiversity and freshwater, primarily for company staff. My name is Margareta Renström and I work at WWF Sweden, and I will be presenting the seminar. This is the first general introduction to climate, biodiversity and freshwater and how these aspects affect society, economy and businesses. The module will feature two sessions of approximately 25 minutes each. The first one is generally about climate change, biodiversity degradation, and freshwater challenges, and how these aspects are interlinked. The second one is about understanding how these issues may affect corporates and the global economy, and how these risks can be mitigated. So let's go to session 1. But first, let's have a look at our planet. Well, we need to recognize that we humans in our society and economic activities all depend on the nature on Earth, with its plants, animals, water, rivers, sunshine. And for us to thrive, nature as we know it needs a stable climate, clean water, and rich biodiversity. But I'm sure you have seen that something has gone wrong. We have all seen these alarming reports on climate change, too much water, too little water, storms, fires, insects and other animals declining. Let's look at a little short introduction film on why this is the case.
People can do amazing things. We can use sunbeams to help us travel. We can catch the wind and have it cook our food. Humans could be the smartest creatures that have ever lived on the planet. But because we're human, we can also do stupid things sometimes. When it comes to our relationship with nature, which provides us with our food, air and water, we have to admit humans on the whole haven't done a great job. To be blunt, we're destroying the natural world that supports us. We know this because we've collected evidence all over the world for years, working with scientists and researchers, using all kinds of monitoring methods. Too many people have been carrying on like nothing is wrong, ignoring the alarm signals nature's been sending us for decades. Ice sheets melting, forests burning, seas rising, extreme weather. Our world is on the brink of disaster, but it's not too late to turn things around. The good news is we can all play a part in helping to fix it, but we need to shout louder about how serious things are.
The good news is that we can do something about it. And WWF works together with business to help mitigate these challenges. So in this webinar, we will now go into these topics a little bit more in detail to see why these aspects are causing challenges to the way we are used to live and run businesses. First, let's start with climate change and global warming. What is the greenhouse effect? The rays from the sun warms the earth. Some of this energy is reflected back from the Earth's surface. A part of the reflected energy escapes back into space, but most is absorbed by greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. This is mainly water vapor and clouds, but also carbon dioxide and methane, for example. Without the greenhouse gases, the Earth would be much colder, minus 18 degrees Celsius on average. But due to the greenhouse gases, the Earth's temperature is about 15.6 degrees, making it much more habitable for us. Driven by the sun, carbon in different forms circulates continuously between the atmosphere, plants and animals, and the soil. Ocean and land vegetation store a lot of carbon, but they also release a lot of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. This is the dominant and natural and balanced part of the carbon cycle, represented by the orange arrows. In addition, a lot of carbon dioxide is emitted by us humans, primarily from burning fossil fuels, coal, oil, and gas, represented by the green arrows. This is carbon that has been stored in the ground for millions of years. Carbon dioxide is also released from agriculture and domestic animals, from deforestation and waste, as well as industrial processes such as cement production. The problem is that these man-made emissions are not balanced by the uptake of carbon dioxide by vegetations on land and the oceans, and therefore the concentration in the atmosphere increases. That is what's causing global warming. The temperature and climate that we have on Earth today has been much the same for about 10,000 years. During this time, the weather patterns have been similar, and the plants and animals have been adjusted to it. This stable climate has given us the opportunity to build the society that we have today. In this graph, we can see that there is a dramatic increase in the global temperature from about 1970. This is caused by a rapid expansion in the use of fossil fuels and food production to cater for the growing population and wealth. This increase in temperature endangers the sensitive balance of our climate. One would think that with a slight increase in temperature, our world would just change slightly. Unfortunately, for many elements, there are thresholds, tipping points, above which they collapse or change dramatically. On this map, you see 9 of these tipping elements that are at risk of changing. If they change, it will have severe consequences on the global environment and our society. Also, if they change, the effect will increase global warming further. Some of the effects that we will see is more frequent extreme weather, droughts and floods, sea level rise, which will threaten coastal areas and island states everywhere, a dramatic increase in climate refugees from areas where it has become too difficult to live. And even worse, but long-term effects, is that the global temperature is pushed outside the range of temperatures that we have enjoyed during these last 10,000 years. Then there is a risk that the climate on Earth leaves this sensitive balance and that the world, as we know it, will change rapidly. This is why we urgently need to cut our emissions. To conclude, emissions from the use of coal, oil, and gas increases the global warming and may cause the Earth's climate to change if they are not reduced dramatically within the next 10 to 20 years. In the next part of the session, you will hear about the challenges of freshwater. So why is freshwater critical? Most of us take freshwater for granted, but freshwater is actually very scarce. Only 3% of all water on Earth is freshwater. The rest, 97%, is found in oceans as saltwater. Most of the fresh water is locked up in glaciers or deep in the ground. So only a very small fraction, around 0.3% of the available fresh water is usable for humans and nature. So fresh water is so scarce, and it is critical for us to use it cautiously. Freshwater is local in nature. It's found deep in the ground in rivers and lakes. And water continuously circulates between land, air, water bodies, and life forms. This movement is called the hydrological cycle. Water also has a global dimension, a global footprint. Large quantities of water gets used in the manufacturing of products, for example, consumer goods like textiles or paper. To produce a pair of jeans and a t-shirt, for example, you might need 13,600 liters of water. The production may happen in one part of the world, while the product may be bought and used in another. We all know how fresh water touches upon every aspect of our life, from food production, energy production, to domestic use, to recreation. And fresh water is also home to many plants and animals. But clean and abundant fresh water is not a given for everybody. Many of the water systems have become stressed. Rivers, lakes, and aquifers are drying up or becoming too polluted to use. For example, more than half of the world's wetlands have disappeared. And some 1.1 billion people worldwide lack access to safe drinking water. In large parts of the world, there is simply not enough good quality fresh water for plants, animals, or humans. There are two main reasons. We are using more water than nature can replenish, causing water shortage, and we are polluting the water through, for example, industry emissions, fertilizer runoffs from fields, leakage of untreated wastewater. This map from WWF Risk Filter indicate the risk for low freshwater quality. So what about biodiversity? This is maybe the most complex topic today, but also incredibly fascinating. Biodiversity is the web of all life on Earth. Biodiversity reflects the number, variety, and variability of all living organisms. There are three basic levels of biodiversity. When we think about biodiversity, we usually think about different species, like elephants, mosquitoes, or different kinds of birds or flowers. This is represented by the middle circle in the picture on the slide. But each individual, each elephant or cherry tree have a specific setup of genes, of DNA. Genetic biodiversity is very important because it gives species a better chance of survival. And finally, we have the ecosystems. That is the physical environment at a specific place. So it includes the bedrock, soils, local climate, together with all its animals and plant species. That can be a tropical rainforest, a coral reef, a desert, a lake, or a green meadow. All ecosystems have their own combination of plants and animals, and some are extremely rich in species. So it is the combination of species and ecosystems that gives us so much of the things and conditions that we humans need to live. This is called ecosystem services. Ecosystem services are, for example, food, medicine, and raw materials such as wood. It provides us also with free services such as pollination of plants and filtration of fresh water and protection against erosions. And of course, it gives us nature as such for recreation. In order for nature to give us all these ecosystem services, the ecosystem needs to be healthy and functioning. This means that there need to be a large variety of plants and animals that are interlinked. Plants and trees of different kinds mean food for different animals and provide places to hide and nest. There needs to be insects that pollinate the plants and that at the same time become food for small animals and birds. And there needs to be larger animals that eat the smaller animals. And finally, there needs to be species that decompose dead plants and animals and creates the nutrition and conditions for plants to continue to thrive. Now we're talking about mushrooms, earthworms and woodbats, but also bacteria. A healthy ecosystem means a kind of equilibrium in the interaction between species. So now let's hear what Sir David Attenborough says about the importance of biodiversity.
Biodiversity is a term that represents the total variety of all life on Earth. That's a big thing to sum up. Thousands of different wild habitats, millions of different species, billions of different individuals, and the trillions of different characteristics they all have. The total biodiversity of our planet is immense, which is a good thing, because the more biodiversity, the more secure all life on Earth is, including ourselves. Only when life is at its most varied, vigorous, biodiverse, can we hope to thrive. We may not know it, but we need towering forests across 1/3 of the land surface to lock away carbon and keep the climate stable. We need millions of pollinators and billions of soil organisms and megatons of plankton to keep the food we eat in supply. We need strange plants deep in jungles to create our medicines, and coral reefs and mangrove swamps to protect the coasts we depend upon. Our planet's biodiversity provides all the things we need for free. But it will only do so if there's lots of it, and at the moment it's under attack. In the last 50 years, our activities have dramatically reduced biodiversity across the globe. We've snuffed out habitats, reduced populations of wild animals by 60%, and even driven whole species extinct. The number of lions in Africa has dropped by 65%. The number of individual flying insects in Europe has dropped by 75%. The number of bluefin tuna in the Pacific has dropped by 95%. Biodiversity is dropping everywhere and fast. This is catastrophic for nature and therefore ourselves. We talk about climate change a lot, but biodiversity loss is as important an issue. How do we stop this loss of life? How do we ensure that biodiversity, our planet's vital statistic, begins to increase again? In fact, we already know exactly what to do. Follow Our Planet, visit ourplanet.com and watch the series on Netflix.
So, as you understand, we need a rich biodiversity for our well-being. It is estimated that 1 million species globally are on the brink of extinction. And in Sweden, 2,200 species are threatened. So why is biodiversity being destroyed at such a pace? Unfortunately, it's our human activities that are causing the extinctions of species. The 5 largest drivers for biodiversity loss are A, the destruction of nature at land and in the oceans, particularly forests being cut down for agriculture. B, overexploitation of species, for example, the massive overfishing in our oceans. C, pollutions of air, water, and soil. D, invasive species. Invasive species are species that are not naturally occurring in a specific ecosystem. The species can be any kind of plant or animal. Invasive species enter an ecosystem, often accidentally through transportation, but they can also be imported deliberately, such as garden plants. Invasive species compete with naturally occurring species and can cause major disruption in the ecosystem and major economic harm. And E, finally, climate change. When the temperatures rise and weather patterns become different, many species cannot cope with this pace and the new conditions. Now you've heard about the importance of having a stable climate, abundant clean water, and a thriving biodiversity on our planet. And you've heard about the challenges. Human activities drives climate change and the loss of species and ecosystems. If we cannot stop climate change, biodiversity will decline and freshwater will become even more scarce. If we cannot provide good water to plants, animals, and ourselves, ecosystems will collapse, and we as humans and our societies will suffer. The good news is that all these aspects are interconnected. So if you address one of them, you will also contribute positively to the others. But we need to act quickly before it is too late. In the coming session, you will learn about how companies can act to help mitigate both climate change and biodiversity loss. But before we end this session, we would like you to take a few moments to reflect on what you just have heard. And please discuss with your colleagues and friends. Why do you think that your company or organization wants you to learn about this subject? Do you know what to do to reduce climate change and water consumption? Do you know what to do to contribute to enhance biodiversity in your local surroundings? Thank you for listening to this first session, and we hope you will also listen to session number 2. Thank you.